Hello everybody, I'm Steve Stay with Coloring Bliss. This is little Rose back here. And I also have somebody who you might know, Jennifer Stay. She sometimes appears on our channel.
Hello everyone!
And today I'm going to be talking about printers and specifically how to print coloring pages, and even more specifically how to get the best results when you print your coloring pages. I have some simple steps. Step one is the paper. You decide what kind of paper you want to print your coloring page on, and then you load that in your either your tray or in your bypass tray if you have a straight through paper path, and that's usually best for heavy cardstock. So let's go ahead and print this Halloween coloring page, which is appropriate for the season. And I'm on an iPhone here. I don't know exactly how it would look on an Android. I'm sorry about that, but I just don't have one. But on the iPhone, you see at the top of the screen, on the kind of to the right, there's that box with the arrow pointing out of it. That's what I'm going to click. The first thing I need to do is I need to tell the printer what paper tray I'm pulling from. So for instance, if I had heavy cardstock and I'm loading it into the manual feed, I want to tell it that the paper is there. Or if it's in the paper tray, I want it to know it's in the paper tray. On this particular printer, here's how I do that. You see here that I have three options. I have auto select, manual tray, and tray 1. This printer only has one paper tray, so that's the default tray. The manual tray is a little drop down thing that I can pop out, and it'll do that straight paper path where it'll take the paper all the way through the machine and spit it out the back. The way auto select works on most of these printers is if you don't have paper in the manual tray, then it will just automatically pull from your main paper tray, which makes sense. On this particular printer, if I put paper into the manual feed, then it knows I want to pull from that and it automatically does it. Now that's on our laser, but on our inkjet, I have to tell it to pull, even if I do have paper in that manual tray. I have to tell it to pull from the manual tray. So each printer is a little bit different. You'll just have to play with that. But that's typically where you're going to find that option for pulling your paper. Okay, step 3 is deciding what quality I want to print. Now, you'll notice here on this that I have 3 different qualities I can choose from. I have draft, normal, and best. Draft is going to use the least amount of ink, and it's going to print the fastest. Normal is a step up from that, and best is a step up from that. And so best is going to be a slow process typically to print your page. It's going to use most of your ink or your toner, but it is going to give you the best results generally. Now, I have found when you're printing black and white coloring pages, a lot of times it's really hard to tell the difference between draft, normal, and best. Step 4 is deciding whether I want to print color or do I want to print black and white. Now, to be honest with you, this is kind of more of an optional step because most of the time you're not ever going to see a difference between the two. But just to give you a few tips and tricks that I use, most of the time I'll print in black and white. And the reason why is because I just don't want to use up cyan, magenta, and yellow. If you have it in color, it will combine kind of all 4 of those colors to make your image. And so it's going to be very little because it's still black that it's printing, right? But it will use a little bit. And sometimes you'll see, especially if you're printing something that's like grayscale, sometimes you'll see like a color cast where the gray looks almost a little blue or maybe a little red. If you ever run into that, that's also where you want to print black and white. Now, having said that, a lot of times if you're doing your best setting that I showed you before, and you do color, you will get the richest black because it will combine all of those colors to create a black. And as long as it doesn't create a color cast, it can actually make the black almost look a little darker. So just play with it and decide for yourself whether that even matters to you. Step 5 is another optional step that may or may not make a difference depending on your art, depending on your printer. But I usually do take this step, and it's to tell the printer what type of paper we're printing on. In this case, if you look up there, it's called media type. As you can see, there are several media types for this printer. Now, not all printers will have these same media types. It just depends on the printer and what options they're choosing to give you. But in this situation, because it's this laser printer that has this straight paper path, it knows that people are probably going to be printing on cardstock or envelopes. And so that's why it gives me so many different options here. Now, if I'm printing on our heavy cardstock, then I'm going to choose the heavyweight paper option you see there in the middle. And doing that will tell the printer to slow down the rollers, take a little more time to bake that image or fuse that image onto the page. If you've ever used a laser printer and it's flaked off a little bit or the toner doesn't quite set well, it could be because you're using a heavy paper and it's just not spending enough time going through that fuser. So those are the situations where you do it, but it is optional. So just go ahead and give it a try and see if it makes a difference for you. Okay, let me show you an example of what I'm talking about with these paper trays. So this printer right here is our laser printer. It's in kind of a bad position here for me to show you the video, but I still took a video anyway. As you can see, the paper's loaded there in that front tray. It pulls it straight through. This is why I call it a straight through paper path, and instead of coming out the top, it comes out the back. And in this situation, it just falls off because, like I said, this is in a less than ideal position. Now this is our inkjet printer. It's also a brother. You can see the paper tray there on the bottom. That's where the main feed is. I push that in, and then there are these little things I can pull out when I'm going to do straight paper path. This one actually feeds the paper in from the back. And so to do that, I have to come in and pull down this little tray, flip up this little wand thing. As you can see, I just put the paper there in the back, and it will pull from the back, and it'll spit it out the front. Now, in this instance, I do need to tell the printer in the print settings that I want to pull from that back tray rather than that front tray. This one also has this little document feeder for scanning, but as you can see, the paper will go straight through there. Let me show you the same 5 steps, but now on a computer. This is my Mac, and I'm using Adobe Acrobat, which is my preferred PDF printer. In this situation, I'm going to show you printing on my inkjet printer. Okay, so now we got this other coloring page here that we're going to print. I do Command P or Control P on Windows or File Print. It brings up the print dialog box. I make sure I select my printer. Okay, so this would be kind of like step 1B. Is I come in and I decide, do I want to print it to fit to page or do I want to print it actual size? This basically determines how big the image that you're printing is going to be on your paper. Most of the time, fit is probably going to be your best option if you don't know what margins your printer has, which most people don't. But you can play with it. As you can see here, if I toggle between fit and actual size, see that little window over there? You can see how it kind of gets a little larger, gets a little smaller. Now on our coloring pages, I give it a 1/2 inch border around it, which is usually plenty to print actual size. But if you hit fit, it'll just shrink it a little bit. Okay, the next step in printing from Adobe Acrobat on a Mac or PC is you'll see down there that you have print settings dialog box that you can open. So press that button, it'll bring up the print settings, and these are similar to what you were seeing on the phone, but they are laid out a little bit different, and quite often you have a lot more options. Don't get too overwhelmed here. Just stick with the same basic steps that I've told you before. Number 1 is which tray. Okay, and again, I can just do the drop down. I can tell it that I want to pull from the manual feed. The next one is the quality. Now in this case, I only have 2 options. I have normal or best. I don't even have that draft option. So say I choose best. And the third one is, do I want it in color or black and white? We discussed that. And then you can also see the media type here. Now on this particular printer, it really doesn't give me an option to choose a heavyweight paper. So in this case, I just ignore that. And now I'm ready to print. I send it over. It'll pull it from that back tray, take it straight through the printer, and give me my results. Here's what I printed on my laser printer. The first one here is the cardstock. This one I printed best quality, and I printed it full color. Okay, this one is the draft quality that's just printed black and white and draft. So from far away, you'd be challenged to even see a difference. The only way you really see a difference is if you nitpick. For example, see this this section here with these leaves. Notice that the lines of the stems of the leaves are a little bit jaggedy. Can you see that right there? See those jagged edges? Now, look here. Those jagged edges are gone because I did best quality and it laid down more toner. and it baked it in a little bit longer. And so it does make a difference, but it may not be worth using more toner and taking up more time. You'll just have to decide that for yourself. I would recommend print one draft, print one best, and compare, and then you can decide. Now here's some others that I printed just for fun. For instance, this one was printed draft, okay? And you know, if you look closely, you'll see the edges again have little jagged marks. So that was draft, black and white only. This is normal, black and white only. The circles start to get just a little bit better, a little more well-defined. And then this one was black and white best. What's interesting is when I go from black and white best to color best, notice that it's actually a little more true to the artwork, where see on the bottom one, that's the color best. And notice how the dots are a little bit lighter. You'll just see things like that happen. They're just, it's a little more refined. It's a little more true to what the artwork is. But again, I mean, you know, if you put them side by side, you're hardly going to see anything. And then the same thing happens here. This is actually a really good example. The bottom one I printed in full color. The top one was just black and white. Can you see the color cast that printing in color got? I don't know. Yeah, you can kind of see there that the full color one looks almost a little blue, where the other one looks a little black. You can also see this was, I think, normal quality, the top one. There are some lines going through that you can see here that are lower quality. You can especially see it when you start looking like up into our logo. Oh man, let's see if you can see this. The bird, I don't know. Hopefully you can see that the bird has some lines going through it, where when we get to the best quality, those lines go away and everything's very smooth. Same with the gray box. Okay, so there you have it. These are the 5 steps that I recommend you take to get the best results when you're printing your coloring pages. Go ahead and play with it. Get to know your printer. And if you want to know more about home printers, we do have a Coloring Academy workshop that I did called Exploring Home Printers. That's a great one for really diving in and getting into more of the details of this type of thing, if that's what you're interested in and if that's what you want to learn. And here on YouTube, we also have a video that I'd recommend you watch that's called What is the Best Paper for Coloring? And we go into depth about the different types of paper we recommend. And in that, there's also a little section in the time markers, you should be able to find it, where I discuss inkjet versus laser and what I'd recommend. Well, there you go. Those are your tips for getting better results for printing your coloring pages. I hope you found that helpful. Let me know in the comments if you did. Is there something you learned that you didn't know before that you found particularly useful? And as Jennifer says, I hope you have a wonderful, colorful, blissful day of printing. Goodbye, everybody.